It's strange how silence can scream louder than sirens. September 11th, 2001, 8:52 a.m. We were 6 blocks from the North Tower when the first collapse shook the ground like judgment itself. I remember the sky raining glass, the air thick with burnt paper and disbelief. You don't forget that sound. A building dying sounds like the world exhaling for the last time. I was a firefighter then. Rookie by experience, veteran by will. My name wasn't important that day, only my reflexes. And for one critical second, they failed me. Our truck skidded to a stop beside the South Tower. Jake, my partner, jumped out first, barking orders through the radio. He was always faster, louder, braver. I followed him, adrenaline pumping like battery acid through my veins. The building roared above us. We ran in anyway. 2 kids trapped on floor 78, the dispatch said. That was our mark. The stairwell was a canyon of chaos. Civilians pouring down, crying, coughing, praying. Some wouldn't look at us. Some grabbed my arm like I was a lifeline they weren't ready to let go of. I told them to keep moving. Keep going. God help me. I said it like it meant something. We climbed against the tide. By the time we reached the lobby mezzanine, the second impact had hit. The tower shook like a living creature in pain. Ceiling tiles fell like rain. My helmet light caught the face of a woman holding her baby, frozen under a collapsing beam. Jake moved instinctively, pushed her out of the way, took the hit to his shoulder. I pulled him back up. We locked eyes, no words needed. That's what years in the smoke together do. You learn to talk without breathing. Then came the order none of us wanted to hear. All units, evacuate immediately. South Tower integrity compromised. We froze mid-step. The tone in the captain's voice wasn't uncertainty. It was surrender. The tower was going. Jake shouted, "We're not leaving them!" and darted forward. I followed him until the world split open. A sound like thunder tore through the stairwell. The floor beneath us lurched. A rush of dust swallowed everything in gray. I lost sight of him, lost sight of everyone. And that's when it happened. My moment. I froze, just stood there, one hand gripping the rail, the other clutching my chest where my father's locket hung. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, I didn't move. Couldn't. The air felt like cement in my lungs. My body locked between survival and duty. When I finally ran, it was too late. The floor above us collapsed in a slow, merciless wave. Jake's voice screamed through the radio, then static. The next thing I remember is daylight. I was outside, covered in dust, my knees bleeding. Someone had dragged me out. I still don't know who. Around me, other firefighters stumbled like ghosts, faces white with ash and shock. One of them, Daniels, looked at me, confusion hardening into accusation. "You froze, didn't you?" he said, shaking his head. "You had Jake right behind you." I tried to speak. Nothing came out. Just the taste of smoke and guilt. Back at the precinct that night, the whispers started. She panicked. She hesitated. She left him. They weren't cruel, not yet. But pity cuts deeper than hate. They avoided my eyes during roll call, kept their jokes short around me. The kind of silence that tells you you're no longer part of the brotherhood. I replayed the moment over and over. Could I have reached him? Could I have saved him? Every time I blinked, I saw his hand reaching through the dust, then gone. Weeks later, my photo was still missing from the memorial wall. Maybe they forgot. Maybe they didn't want it there. When the captain told me the official report said operational hesitation under duress, it felt like a death sentence wrapped in polite phrasing. Jake got the flag. I got the silence. But here's what no one knew. Not the captain, not Daniels, not even the families of the fallen. Those 3 seconds I froze. I wasn't frozen by fear. I was deciding what to do with what I'd seen, what I was still hiding. And if I had moved faster, that secret would have died in the fire that day. But it didn't. It's been 24 years. And sometimes I still hear the radio crackle in my sleep. Evacuate immediately. And I whisper back to the dark, I couldn't. I wasn't done yet. Before that day, before the world split in half, my life was already burning, not with flames, but with expectations. I grew up in a small apartment in Brooklyn, the daughter of a firefighter who never came home from Engine 42. They said the building collapse was sudden, that he didn't feel a thing. But I was 10, and 10-year-olds don't care about soft landings. They just know the door stopped opening every evening at 6. Dad was the kind of man who made courage look ordinary. He'd leave before sunrise with a thermos of black coffee, always saying the same thing before he closed the door. Fear's a choice, kiddo. Fire isn't. When he died, everyone called him a hero. That word haunted me more than it healed me. Heroes don't leave their daughters watching the news for hours, waiting for confirmation that never brings peace. Mom wanted me to be anything but him. Nurse, teacher, anything that didn't involve smoke and alarms. I promised her I would. But promises made to grieving mothers tend to crumble when ghosts whisper in your sleep. By 21, I'd joined the academy. I wasn't the strongest. Not even close. But I was stubborn. The kind of stubborn that makes you run until your lungs feel like razor blades. The instructors hated my questions. Why do we enter from the east flank? What happens if the stairwell collapses mid-exit? I wasn't trying to be smart. I was trying not to die like him. That's where I met Jake. He was already halfway through training, the kind of man who looked like he'd been carved out of smoke and sarcasm. His reputation preceded him. 3 commendations, 0 patience for rookies. But he noticed me. Maybe it was because I never flinched during burn drills, or maybe he saw the same hollow stare in my eyes that he carried after losing his own partner. He used to say, "You think too much, rookie. Fire doesn't wait for philosophy." And I'd shoot back, then maybe that's why it keeps winning. We became partners not by choice, but by process. The department believed pairing opposites created balance. He was instinct. I was analysis. Together, we made it work. And when he finally started calling me kid, I knew I'd earned his trust, and the weight that came with it. My mother hated my uniform. She said it smelled like grief. She wasn't wrong. The night before my first live call, she handed me something wrapped in cloth, my father's locket. It was the only thing they found unbroken, she said. He wore it under his turnout gear. I opened it. Inside was a faded picture, Dad holding me in his arms outside Engine 42, and something tiny sealed behind the photo, a sliver of metal with engraved numbers. I didn't understand what they meant, but I never took it out. Maybe it was a code from an old case, or maybe it was just part of the chain he wore for luck. Either way, I wore it from that night on. Every mission, every fire, every collapse. It was there, resting against my chest like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. Over the years, Jake and I built a rhythm. He'd dive first, I'd map the exits. He'd make the call, I'd calculate the risk. The station started joking that we were the lungs of the same fire. He got the medals. I didn't care. All I wanted was not to repeat my father's ending. But heroism has a way of circling back on you. The more you save, the more you owe. And the day before 9/11, Jake and I had our last argument. We were cleaning the rig after a late-night call. He was quiet, quieter than usual. I asked him what was wrong. He said, "You ever wonder what they don't tell us? The places we go, the people we save, half the time we don't even know who they really are." I laughed it off, but he wasn't joking. He said he'd seen things on classified assignments. Fire marshals escorted by men in suits, restricted floors sealed off before the flames were even out. "Sometimes," he said, "we're just part of the cover story." I didn't know what to say. He looked at me like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. He just handed me a new helmet, one with a mounted cam. "Record everything," he said. "Trust what you see, not what they tell you." That night, I placed my father's locket around my neck and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The chain glowed faintly under the bathroom light, steel against skin, past against present. I remembered my father's final words before his last shift. "If you ever have to choose between the mission and a life, choose what you can live with. At the time, I didn't understand what that meant. But less than 24 hours later, when the sky over Manhattan turned to ash, I finally would. The morning of September 11th started like any other. Coffee, banter, the sound of boots on concrete. No one ever expects history to start on an ordinary Tuesday. Jake was at the truck early, fixing the oxygen line that always jammed. I remember joking that he'd marry that thing if it had a name. He just grinned, threw me my helmet, and said, "Keep your cam on this time. Today's gonna be a long one." When the first explosion hit, we thought it was a gas line. The call came seconds later. Plane impact at the World Trade Center. Multiple floors on fire. We didn't hesitate. The city we loved was bleeding. And we were its bandages. By the time we reached Lower Manhattan, chaos had a pulse, and it was everywhere. Papers fluttered like dying birds, sirens screamed over screams, and the air tasted like jet fuel. The North Tower was already burning. The South Tower glowed with reflection and fear. Jake looked at me, jaw tight. "We're going up, no hesitation." That was our rhythm. The truth was no longer just a secret, it was a weapon, and I was its unwilling keeper. They said it wasn't an interrogation, just a review. But when I walked into that gray-walled conference room at HQ and saw the row of brass seated across from me, I knew it wasn't a review. It was judgment. The nameplates glinted under the fluorescent lights. Chief Morrell, Captain Ruiz, Commander Vance. 3 men who'd seen hell, survived it, and now looked at me like I'd brought it back with me. I sat down. My hands still smelled faintly of ash even after all these years. "Firefighter Daniels," Morrell began, voice cold but rehearsed. "We're reopening the 9/11 response files. Your unit's actions during the South Tower operation need clarification. Clarification. That word again. Every time it came up, it felt like another match against my skin. They played the public footage first. The exterior cams, the dash shots from the trucks, a few news clips of chaos and smoke. My silhouette appeared once or twice, carrying a child, stumbling, covered in gray. Then came the questions. Why had I deviated from the team's assigned stairwell? Why had I been the last to report back on radio frequency 9? And most importantly, why had Jake Cole never made it out? I kept my answers measured. Mechanical. Structural collapse blocked the exit. Communication systems failed. I followed evacuation orders. Lies. That were half true. The kind that sting worse than the full ones. Then Commander Vance leaned forward. His eyes, sharp and unforgiving, studied me like I was a puzzle missing one vital piece. Cole's camera. It was logged as missing. Any idea where it ended up? That question hit like a backdraft. I shook my head, throat dry. "No, sir. Last I saw, it was damaged in the collapse." He nodded. Slowly, too slowly. "We found fragments from other cams that day. Yours wasn't among them." Morrell folded his hands. "If you remember anything else, anything that could shed light on what happened before the collapse, now's the time to say it." The room went silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. In my chest, Jake's words burned again. "If they ever ask?" "You froze," I swallowed. "There's nothing else to tell." The inquiry ended without ceremony. I walked out the same way I had years ago, carrying the same invisible weight. Only now it was heavier. Outside HQ, the autumn wind smelled like burnt metal. Across the street, a group of rookies laughed. Fresh uniforms, bright eyes. The kind of innocence that dies the first time you hear a Mayday. I sat on the curb for a long time, staring at my reflection in the glass doors. A survivor, a coward, a liar. It depended on who you asked. That night, I went home and opened my locker. The same dented steel box that had followed me through every station transfer. Inside, behind the medals and folded letters, was the small black case I'd never opened. Jake's camera. The seal was still intact, soot-streaked, scratched, but whole. For 20 years, I'd kept it buried, convincing myself I was protecting his memory. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't protecting Jake. I was protecting myself. Because if I saw what was on that tape, if I faced what I'd done or failed to do, I might never recover. I powered it up. Nothing. Battery dead. I grabbed an adapter, shaking hands connecting the wires. A flicker. A sound. A flash of static. And then Jake's voice. Colin Daniels. Impact zone, floor 78. We've got civilians trapped. My heart hammered. I could hear myself in the background, breathless, focused, still believing we'd both make it out. Then came something else. Voices that didn't belong to our unit. Orders, but not from command. A private frequency. Jake turned toward the sound. The camera caught the faint glint of something. A patch on a man's arm. Not NYFD, not police. Something else. The feed cut there. I sat frozen, staring at the paused frame. Jake's final seconds weren't just about a rescue gone wrong. There was someone else in that building, someone who shouldn't have been there. Someone giving orders. The next morning, I went back to HQ. I handed the camera to the duty officer with a shaking voice. "Tell Commander Vance," I said. "The footage was found. And he needs to see it." He looked at me, confused, but took it. For the first time in 20 years, I didn't feel like running. I'd kept Jake's promise, but now, it was time to keep mine. If the truth was buried under the rubble all this time, then maybe, just maybe, it was ready to surface, and I was done being afraid of what it might reveal. The call came just after midnight. No name on the screen, just a restricted number and the kind of silence that makes your spine go cold before you even answer. "Daniels," a voice rasped. "You didn't get that footage from us. You understand?" Click line dead. I sat there, still holding the phone to my ear, staring at the blinking cursor on my computer. The transfer window was open. Jake's recovered video had finished uploading to HQ servers only an hour ago. Someone somewhere knew, and they weren't happy. By morning, I was summoned back to HQ, no explanation. Just a message stamped urgent and confidential. Inside the same gray-walled briefing room from the inquiry, everything felt different. The air smelled like toner and tension. Commander Vance wasn't there. Neither was Captain Ruiz, only Chief Morrell, and a man I'd never seen before. He wore a plain suit, no insignia, no name tag. His eyes were calm in the way only people trained to lie can be. "Firefighter Daniels," he said smoothly. "We've reviewed the recovered camera. Unfortunately, the data was corrupted beyond usable form." "Corrupted?" I'd watched it with my own eyes. Jake's voice. "The mystery patch. The hidden transmission. None of it was corrupted." "Sir, that's impossible." Morrell cut in sharply. "Daniels, you did the right thing by bringing it in. But these matters go beyond our purview. National security classification. That's all you need to know." My chest went tight. "So that's it? We bury it again?" The suited man's expression didn't change. "Sometimes that's what honor demands. Honor. The word used to mean something. Now it felt like ash on my tongue. They dismissed me within minutes, but I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to the station's archive wing, an old building with flickering bulbs and rows of steel cabinets that hadn't been touched since before digital logging. If they'd erased the footage from the servers, maybe they'd missed something from the system backup. I logged into the restricted drive, bypassing a password I wasn't supposed to know. Years on, the Force teaches you what to look for when brass hides things. There it was. A duplicate folder. Timestamped just before the inquiry. File name, OP Rescue, Priority Footage, Internal Use Only. I clicked, static. Then, a frame. Jake's camera angle, just as I remembered. But then it shifted. Something I hadn't seen before. The feed zoomed past Jake's shoulder, catching a man in dark tactical gear talking into a radio. His words were faint but clear enough to twist my stomach. Negative. Extraction not confirmed. Repeat, leave civilians. Secure floor intel. Leave civilians. Secure intel. Jake must have heard it too. His head snapped toward the voice, and that was when the ceiling began to collapse. The recording ended. I exhaled shakily, palms slick. They weren't just rescuers in that building that day. There was another unit, covert, operating under someone's classified directive. Suddenly, I understood why they wanted this buried. I copied the file to a flash drive, shoved it in my jacket, and killed the monitor. But as I turned to leave, I saw movement in the reflection. 2 shadows at the end of the hallway. "Daniels," someone called. "Step away from the terminal." It was the same suited man from HQ, flanked by security. My pulse pounded in my ears. "Sir, people deserve to know what happened." He stepped closer, voice calm, too calm. "And you deserve to stay alive, son. That file never existed." I hesitated, just long enough to see his hand twitch, the signal for the guards to move. Then I ran. Down the stairwell, through the alley behind the archives. Rain hit hard, washing the soot of 20 years off my face. I clutched the flash drive like a heartbeat. When I reached my truck, I shoved the drive into the glove box and sat there breathing in gas and adrenaline. For the first time since 9/11, I wasn't sure who the enemy really was. That night, I sent an encrypted email to one person, Commander Vance. The subject line read only, "For your eyes only, Jake's truth." Attached, a backup of the drive, plus my statement. I didn't know if he'd open it, didn't know if it would survive the filters, or if I'd survive the week. But I did know one thing. The truth was no. Longer mine to hide, because they could erase files. They could rewrite reports. They could even bury heroes. But they couldn't silence what was already burning in the system, and if they wanted that fire gone, they'd have to erase me next. 3 days passed before I heard anything. No calls. No warnings. Just silence. The kind that hums louder the longer you wait. Every night, I sat on my porch with the same mug of black coffee, watching the streetlights flicker like the ghosts of sirens. The flash drive stayed in my glove box, my only proof that Jake's sacrifice meant something. Then, on the 4th morning, I saw it. A plain brown envelope slid under my door. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in that precise slanted style that could only belong to one man, Commander Vance. Inside was a single USB stick and a short note. "They can bury the story, Daniels, but they can't bury what's already been seen. V." My hands trembled as I connected the drive. The file was labeled Archive Freedom 91 Yud MP4. The video opened with HQ surveillance footage, not from 2001, but from last week. A timestamp. A conference room. Chief Morrell sitting across from the suited man. Their voices came through clear. "The footage is secure," Morrell said. "Good," the man replied. "Ensure Daniels understands the value of silence. We don't need another martyr." Then another voice cut in from off-screen. Firm, familiar. "Vance, you made the mistake of thinking he's afraid of dying." Silence. Then gunfire. One shot. The screen went black. My stomach dropped. I rewound the file twice, hoping I'd heard wrong. But the echo was real. Commander Vance, the one man who'd believed in my truth, was gone. I sat there, staring at the monitor, feeling the old burn of helplessness return. Just like that day in the tower, when I froze, when I thought courage meant surviving. But Vance had shown me what real courage was, refusing to stay silent. That night, I drove to Ground Zero. The memorial lights were glowing, twin beams cutting through the Manhattan fog like eternal searchlights. The air smelled of rain and steel, cleaner than it had any right to be. I stood where the South Tower once stood, feeling the ghosts breathe through the wind. I pulled the drive from my pocket and looked at it one last time. "You deserve the truth, Jake," I whispered. "We all do." Then I walked into a nearby press station, a local network that had been running tributes all week. I handed the drive to a producer and said only one thing: "Play this on air." "Don't ask who I am." She hesitated, but there must have been something in my eyes, that look of a man who's already lost everything. She nodded. By midnight, the footage was everywhere. The public saw what we weren't supposed to see. The orders. The lies, the cover-up. They saw Jake's final seconds. The civilians abandoned, the tactical unit that never existed in official reports. And most of all, they saw the truth. Raw, undeniable, carved in digital flame. The next morning, my phone exploded with calls from news outlets, investigators, even old friends from the department. I didn't answer a single one. I went to the station locker one last time, took my turnout coat, and hung it neatly on the hook. The same coat that carried the soot from that day. The same coat that once made me feel like a hero. On the bench beneath it, I left my badge and Vance's note. Then I walked out into the rising dawn, toward the city that had taken everything and still somehow kept breathing. People talk about closure like it's a clean ending, but it isn't. Closure is standing in the ashes of what you loved and realizing the truth didn't destroy you. It set you free. They said I froze on 9/11. Maybe they were right. But this time, when it mattered most, I finally moved. And somewhere, in the smoke between memory and justice, I swear I could hear Jake's voice again. Good job, brother. Took you long enough,